The Roman Empire meets Pokemon. It was enough to get me drawn into this, but even with over 100,000 reviews and a 4.1 on Goodreads, I was a little taken aback by The Furies of Calderon by Jim Butcher. So hello, my name is Zach, and on this channel I mostly review science fiction and fantasy books. And in that note, I find whatever looks interesting, browse Goodreads, look at top reviews and recommendations on Reddit r fantasy, and I did see this recommended a lot. Jim Butcher's The Furies of Calderon, part 1 of the Codex Alera series, or volume 1 of the Codex Alera. And based on that review and based on the premise of Pokemon, the Lost Roman Legion, I definitely was intrigued. I was actually really hyped and maybe overhyped going into this book, and that's where maybe I let my expectations get the better of myself because it didn't click for me. So I finished book 1, but really going to be struggling on reading book 2. So that is my opening thoughts, opening monologue of this book. So the book, the premise of it is, apparently, when I was reading the reviews after finishing it, that Jim Butcher, who is best known for the Dresden Files, which I haven't read, so is a new author to me, it was given the challenge on the internet of combining two things into a book. And the challenge he was given was Pokemon and the Lost Roman Legion. And he actually succeeds in that because the book sort of blends the elements, but doesn't lean too strong into either one, other than it's like a nation, it's an empire, this Roman Legion, and they have powers similar to Pokemon. But the caveat being that I found the powers more aligned to Avatar: The Last Airbender, whereas I was going into this hoping that we would have our buddy Pokemon, that we'd have our Pikachu or our Charmander or Squirtle on our shoulder on a wacky adventure with our protagonist. And it sort of does that in a way that they have kind of like this bonded power, this fury crafting system, but it just didn't really live up to what the essence of Pokemon, of buddies and, I choose you, the Pokemon theme song. Yeah, so that's where I think I was let down in the premise, that it sort of delivered on half of it, but it felt more a bit like Avatar because it was like very elemental specific powers in the power system that he creates. So that's our story. And then to talk a little bit more about the setup for the story, it does follow a bit of the fantasy novel tropes, which, don't get me wrong, I love, of the hero with seemingly without powers, who is our main character, this young boy who goes off on a grand adventure in a world filled with Pokemon. So yes, that could also be the premise and the setup of Pokemon. But in this case, our main character, Tavi, he's someone born without the power of fury crafting, where this is kind of like a negative, maybe getting ahead of myself. They don't really explain exactly too much into how the fury crafting works. That if it's a bond, that we kind of assume it's some kind of bond because the people in the book, they kind of call their fury as a pet. It's kind of like Pokemon, and then they kind of assist them with doing tasks, moving things, battling, but it's not really explained. And again, this might be just Jim Butcher's writing. I haven't read the Dresden Files, but it's kind of like not really explained. You're dropped into the world, and I assumed we'd get more into this as the book went on, because I guess I assumed it would lean into that trope that yes, the main character doesn't have any powers, but then he's going to find out that he is the long lost son, or he's like a half fury, half human hybrid, and somehow like an anime or manga trope that this is going to be unlock the powers. But that's what didn't work for me, because at the end we don't really get the resolution and the payoff. So I guess what I liked is that it did not get into the negatives yet, but to start with the positives, what I liked was it was a fantasy book, and it did kind of deliver on those classic fantasy tropes. You have this Roman legion, this empire out there, and they have this fury crafting power. So there is this Pokemon-esque elemental battle system where everyone is usually bonded to a fury, and they have fire, wind, wood, kind of like, or Naruto, ninja powers. It's everyone's and has an elemental power like in Avatar, versus, like I said, like Pokemon, where yes, they're elemental, but they could also be like they have a type, but they also just have kind of wacky powers and attacks, not necessarily limited to kind of one element, but it does make for a neat and tidy fantasy power system where we kind of know what happens and how earth people are good at one thing, how water is like the healers, how fire does other things. So it does kind of categorize things. And then the story, it is, again, as I mentioned, kind of a classic fantasy trope where Tavi, our main character, goes off on a grand adventure and he seemingly has no powers. And again, this is only book 1, so this might be a spoiler. I don't know it's a spoiler. I didn't read ahead for other spoilers, but I don't know if he later gains powers, because at the end of the first book he's on to the academy, but I don't know if he gains powers later. And it also has like a trope where there's like an invading force, the Marats. They are this like animalistic tribal people, or humanoid. They're not really people, but they're humanoid, like not really monsters, but yeah, just humanoid creatures that are kind of animalistic, but they're definitely human thought. They talk, they war, but they're just a little more barbaric, I guess, than are the actual humans in the story. And what's driving the main plot is this invading or threat, the invasion of the Marats. And then Tavi gets swept up and gets kind of ingrained in the Marat culture and a little bit tropey, but yeah, he ends up saving the princess and then they bond. And it reminds me, I guess, not of Avatar The Last Airbender, but of Avatar, the 3D blue people movie, where he kind of bonds and goes native a little bit with the Marat. And this is now talking a bit about negatives, that it doesn't resolve what that was, that we're given this hint that somehow this bond formed between Tavi and the princess of the Marat, and that resolves that story arc where he's with the Marat. But then I was expecting this to be maybe somehow related to the Fury crafting, that maybe the Marat are actually Furies, and because we're not told what the Furies really are the Furies like the spirits of the Marat? Is it somehow intertwined? And now that Tavi is bonded with the princess, is he going to gain some sort of special powers and now be able to unlock a new level and can access all the elements like Avatar The Last Airbender? And so it also kind of reminded me a bit of Sanderson in the way that you have this realm of people that the natives are not the humans, that in this book, the Alarans are kind of the invading force that came to this realm, and the Marat are the native people. Like in Stormlight Archive, the Singers are the native population. So that was a parallel to me, even though I think this is probably written before Sanderson, but I feel like, okay, yes, I think Sanderson did it better, and I was more invested in the Singers from book 1. Not saying that this might not get better, that I feel that it's very open-ended, and I think I saw that in my quick scanning of others' reviews, that the author, Jim Butcher, his writing style is more slow-paced, world-building, but I guess it wasn't fast enough or interesting enough for me to draw me in. That yes, I've read a decent number of Wheel of Time already, and even though that's also very slow-paced, I was more invested in the characters and in the larger world, this larger looming threat of the Dark Lords reviving and all the stuff that's happening in Wheel of Time, versus here in the Furies of Calderon, that there's not a lot else going on in the world, that you have this threat of the Marats, but we see the Marats and we get introduced to them. There's not another looming threat of a Dark Lord reviving, a Sauron coming back to claim the One Ring. It's very political, I guess, intrigue. So to wrap this up, that's who I would recommend this book for. So if you like more politics-driven fantasy, nations, armies, kind of talking with a bit of elemental powers that are somehow in the wings, this might be for you. But if you're looking for more of a payoff on the promise of Pokemon meets Roman Legion, it didn't really scratch that itch for me. I'm still really looking for a Pokemon-esque fantasy series. I think that would be a cool concept to explore as a book, as opposed to just a game, that there's these buddy Pokemon that they capture. Yeah, the Furies, we're not told how they're captured. There's no Pokeballs here. So I was, hoping for more to lean into the Pokemon element, and this leaned more into the Roman Empire element. So that's who I would recommend this for, not for Pokemon fans, but for hands of the Roman Empire, I guess you could say. But it just didn't hit for me. So to me, it's like a 2.5 out of 5. I hate to rate it so low because it's rated so highly by others on Goodreads, but it just didn't click for me. I needed something a bit more action oriented, leaning more into the magic. That while the battles were there and they were okay, they just weren't, I guess, what I was looking for in the series. And I feel bad rating it so low because others rate so high. But even though we did have some Fury battles, it just left me on the whole lacking. And that's kind of my just honest opinion on it, is that it's a 2.5 out of 5 for me. It's just mid-tier, like sub-mid-tier, and I probably wouldn't recommend it to many others. I think there's plenty of other great books and series out there to try. So I think this is a DNF on the series that I made through book 1, but I'm not sure I'm going to read, I think, the other 5 books in the Codex Alera series. At the end of this book, the first battle is resolved, the pieces achieved for now between the tribes, and then Tavi is off, but we're given hints that he's maybe a secret prince. He still doesn't have any powers. We're not really given hints about what Fury crafting is, and it just left me more questions and unfulfilled expectations than I was comfortable investing another 20 plus hours in the next book for. So there's my thoughts on Jim Butcher's The Furies of Calderon, Book 1 of Codex Alera. So thank you for watching and have a great day.